What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum Podcast. It's your boy Ryan. I'm back. My head is full of dust and allergies and a cold, I think. I'm not sure. Regardless, we are here. We are ready to talk Commander. This is Commander Ad Populum episode 3. Commander by the people, for the people, by the people. Welcome. This is actually the second recording of this segment of the show because I'm a dummy and saved over the first one, but here we go. I've only ever recorded, hundreds of podcasts before, but here I am making the same mistakes as episode 1. Anyways, this is Commander Ad Populum. We talk about community subjects or community submitted topics. We do a quick technical section, something that is specific to Magic the Gathering Commander gameplay, and then we do a set retrospective. We look back throughout the history of Magic on sets of old, so anybody who hadn't experienced those sets can get a small taste of what they missed and maybe be turned on to something new that they didn't even know existed. Today we're looking at Arabian Nights. What a gem. What a gem of a set. 78 cards, I think. No rares, just commons and uncommons. Anyways, we'll get to that after. A little bit of business I got to cover first, even before we get into the community section. Huge shout out to new patrons. Last episode, I didn't even have the proper URL set up to tell anybody where to go, but still people found the Patreon page and pledged. And that's amazing. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if anybody was even going to listen, right? Who wants to, I'm sitting here in a studio, I'm talking to the walls, right? Who wants to listen to that? But apparently people do. So huge thank you to everybody who listened, everybody who follows on Twitter or retweets or gets the show out there, but especially a big thank you to new patrons, Aaron and Amy. They are an item, everybody. They are together. They are two of my biggest supporters. They're both supporters on Commander Cookout and now Commander Ad Populum. And I was talking to Amy a bunch after she pledged. I said thank you. I texted her. And then we got to talking about Magic Fest Seattle that she's going to. That's what we're going to talk about today in the community section. She didn't know that at the time, but I was making notes and stuff. So huge shout out to Amy and Aaron. Big shout out to Seaburn. I actually had to ask him how to say it because we just give people funny nicknames on Commander Cookout. And I wanted to know how to actually really say his name to give him a real thank you. And we texted a bunch too, and we were talking about Commander a lot, and I was taking notes on his conversation too. So I've got a few spicy nuggets from that conversation too that I definitely am going to want to talk about in the future. Big shout out to my sister as well. My sister Stephanie, she logged on to the Patreon site and found it, and she gave me a mention on Facebook and stuff. And she didn't even play Magic, right? She just wants her brother to do good and be successful and all that jazz, right? It's funny, I was beaking her the other day. She's getting married this summer, and I think it's Magic Fest Portland or something. Whatever the one in July is, that's when she's getting married. And I told her I could go to a Magic Fest, but no, somebody has to go and get married. So that's what she's doing. So thank you to her. And finally, just from this morning, big shout out to Riley for becoming a patron as well. Sorry, I'm not using anybody's last names. I don't know if you want me to do that or not. I know what your last names are. You know who you are. It's funny, Riley and I, he gets me to alter cards for him, but he is in Australia. So I send him a message in my time, and he replies to me, 8 in the morning when he gets up for work, his time. It's 11 o'clock here, and vice versa, right? That's always lots of fun. So anyways, the Patreon's set up now. And I'm not going to ask anybody to go there. It's patreon.com/cadpopcast, just like the email, just like the Twitter. And I've tweaked it a little bit because I'm actually going to start using it as a platform to showcase a little bit more of my painted cards, my altered art cards. So if anybody listening doesn't know that I do that, that's my real job outside of the 2 podcasts that I do and being a dad and a husband. And now that it's beginning to be summer, like a yard worker, since about last August, I think, I've been altering cards full time. I do auctions once a week, and the rest of my income is made up of commissioned work. And I'm going to be using the Patreon kind of once I get a little bit of an understanding of what the appetite is for the people who are frequenting the Patreon page and the Facebook page and the podcast. Whatever anybody wants from those Patreon tiers, whatever it be, free shipping, discounted rates off of Altered Art commissions, right? Maybe I have to set up an actual chart of what you get for the budget that you have in mind. And then if you're a patron of a certain tier or whatever, I can knock a certain percentage off of that. Whatever it ends up looking like, that'll roll out as more people tell me what they're kind of interested in as far as altars go and how much they should be mixed with the podcast. It is the podcast for the people. So if you want it, let me know. I'll do my best to make it happen. I mentioned the Facebook and Twitter, at CADPopcast on Twitter, CADPOPCAST, and then Commander Ad Populum on Facebook, and cadpopcast@gmail.com if you wanted to write a longer form content submission. So that's all that. I've got one more piece of business. I've been in contact with a couple people for a logo, but I don't have anything locked down quite yet. So if you are a designer, an illustrator, or whatever you are that wants to make a logo, shoot it my way. It could be featured. Maybe I'll have like a rolling logo with like I switch it up a few times, So if you're into that, let me know. We'll set something up. Getting into today's community section. So I'm talking to patron Amy. And we've talked lots, like she's commissioned altars for me before, and she's asking me about Magic Fest. She's going to Seattle. It's like her first Magic event, right? And not her first like F&M or her first going to her friend's house and playing with her friends, like her first walk into a room and there's like 1, 2, 3, 5,000 people all sitting there playing Magic, right? This is huge. It's a big deal. She was nervous, like, what if nobody wants to play with me? Or what if they, whatever, right? And I'll tell a story in a little bit how it used to be 5, 6, 10 years ago, whatever. Now, it's 100% the opposite of what Amy was thinking. You walk in and there's like all these tables and there's huge vendor signs and a main play area, a feature area, registration, prize pickup. There's all this stuff that is fairly clearly labeled with big flags and banners and stuff, right? And you go over to the on-demand area or the casual play area, now that that's going to be a thing, and you just like say, hey, do you want to jam a game? Or you go and pay a fee or trade a voucher in to sit down for a pickup game of Commander, and you just play. And it's multiplayer, and the pickup games or the on-demand games of Commander are fairly casual. So you can expect to not sit down and get like turn 2'd or turn 3'd by some Storm combo deck or whatever, right? And because Commander's multiplayer and very political, somebody is going to be willing to help you because probably it's going to give them a political advantage or some strategic advantage in the game, right? They help you, so when you do a better thing than what you're going to do if they didn't help you, you won't attack them or you won't target them because they helped you. Right? So it behooves them to help you. It really does. But over and above that, everybody is there to have fun and to play Magic. And that's what they do. Like if you're struggling and not having fun, people recognize that and they want to make it so you do have fun. Or if something happens in the game that might not be resolvable or you can't quite figure it out because it might be like you're sitting down at a game of Commander for 2 hours, let's say, and there's 50 things on the board, they're all interacting. You just put your hand up. There's judges everywhere. There's hundreds of judges at these events. And they come over, even to the casual areas. You just call them over, explain the situation or show them your hand, and you just say, hey, like, does this work the way I want it to with this? And you just point to it on the table. They're very good at figuring things out, right? They'll just read the card and they'll tell you yes or no or whatever. And problem solved. Like I call judges all the time because I play either combo decks or really weird cards that I'm not used to maybe somebody isn't used to that interaction, so the judge can explain it and have them believe it more than me explaining it and have them believe it, right? And a lot of the times in these big Commander games, like all the judges play Commander, right? Sometimes they just come over and watch. And it's not to make you nervous or to police your game. It's because they are interested in having fun and playing Magic just like you are. They're probably jealous, honestly. I mean, who wouldn't be? You get to sit down and play Commander with a bunch of awesome people, right? So that's all good. Magic Fests are great, right? I'm talking to Amy the other day, and I say, make sure you don't bring too much stuff, right? You think, oh, I'm going to be there all day. Doors open at 10, doors close at 10. I'm going to be there 12 hours, right? Doesn't necessarily work like that. I told her 2 decks, probably maximum, right? Maybe on Twitter at CADPopcast, let me know how many decks do you bring to your Magic Fest. I usually bring 3. I bring like a fairly jank, just fun one. I bring one that's tuned, that's strong and tuned, and that I'm very familiar with. And then I'll bring my actual CEDH deck. And that's because I play in the daily events that are scheduled, and because those are prized events, other people are showing up with like legitimate tier 1 competitive EDH decks. And I want to have interaction in my deck. I want to be able to not just have a 10-minute non-game because they turn 2'd me, right? And if you don't have a CEDH deck and you want to play in the daily events, not an issue. All you have to do is make sure that you're very familiar with the deck and that you are running multiple forms of interaction, whether those be removal spells, sweepers, counter spells, that kind of stuff. Just to make sure that the competitive decks that are trying to go off and win, that you're just stopping them. The last Magic Fest that I went to in Calgary a couple months ago, I can't even remember how many times that I said I wish that I was playing a stacks deck or just something that shut off people casting multiple spells in a turn. Because if you can limit a CEDH deck to maybe 1 spell per turn, that's going to buy you 2, 3, 4 more turns, right? And sometimes that's all you need in a deck that you're very familiar with that is somewhat powerful. So that's that, and that kind of leads me right into the technical section for today. I'm talking with a friend of the show the other day, and he was telling me that he thinks, at the very least in his meta, people are moving away from the mass board wipes or the sweepers or the destroy all creature type spells, and they're moving towards something that's a little bit more pinpoint or increasing the number of spot removal spells in their deck. And I thought, well, in casual, it's still very excellent to run sweepers because in casual EDH, like most of the time, you're winning by attacking with creatures. And a Wrath of God effect is still probably the best form of card advantage that you're going to get because you're going to kill any number between 2 and 22 creatures in a single go or like a single card, right? And I'm thinking about it a little bit more now since I've started to put the show together. I'm thinking, well, Commander 5 years ago, maybe bigger creatures or a higher density of big creatures was more common than it is now. So Wraths would have been better 5 years ago. But with my experience and my knowledge of the format and what is really powerful in the format, I tend to be less scared of lots of big creatures than I used to be. Lots of decks now are packing a little bit more interaction to stop me from what I'm doing and are trying to land a very dense combo, like a 2-card combo, 3-card combo, or cheat something far more powerful into play. If they're cheating something far more powerful into play that I am legitimately scared of in-game, if I have a 1 or 2 mana spot removal spell for it and all of the Wraths in my hand are dead because there's maybe 1 creature on the battlefield, I don't know, that spot removal is looking pretty good. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that because I want to get onto Arabian Nights, but this is what I want from anybody who's listening. Sweepers versus spot removal. In your meta, have you noticed the cards that people are running trending one way or the other? Do you still see a whole ton of sweeper cards? Or are people packing pinpoint removal? Or not even pinpoint removal, but something like newly printed Lazatep plating gives you and your permanents hexproof until end of turn, right? If you've got one thing and somebody else is packing a whole bunch of spot removal for your one scary thing, you just Lazatep plating and you're still good. Are we starting to see more cards like that? Or is everybody still on the sweepers are the best way to get advantage because I'm spending 1 card and getting multiple cards? Or I'm spending 4 mana in Wrath of God's case to undo all of the mana you've spent on all your creatures. I understand that Wraths are still probably better, but which ones keep you alive longer? Which ones are better now? It would actually be interesting to see, like, I said earlier, I'm not really scared of somebody having a whole bunch of big creatures. I might be scared of the one card or the one or two cards that are going to win them the game. And a bunch of big creatures can still attack me and win. But now I think I'm a little bit more comfortable and experienced in using my voice to politic those creatures in a different direction, right? So maybe it's player two's, I'm player one, it's player two's turn. He's got 5 big creatures, and I say, no, attack player 3. Kills player 3 instead of me, and then on my turn, I leave mana, like when it comes back to me, I leave mana up to spot remove the biggest one, or do I Wrath of God? Like, what does that situation look like in your play group? Maybe let me know on Twitter. It'd be interesting to see the differences between play groups. Okay, oh baby. This is the part that I was the most excited for this episode. This is the set retrospective on Arabian Nights. This is like Magic's first real expansion. Came out December of 1993. How many people were even alive listening to this in December of 1993? That's what I want to know. Anyways, 78 cards, no rares, just commons and uncommons. And the set symbol is a little like curved sword, the little scimitar, and they're black bordered. So like some of the scimitar cards were reprinted in Chronicles. Those don't count. We're looking for black bordered ones, including black bordered scimitar set symbol mountain, because it was the only basic in Arabian Nights. So if you got a bunch of those, you're kind of sitting on a gold mine because they're actually expensive. Aside from that mountain, Arabian Nights was the first expansion to actually feature land cards that didn't just tap for mana. Last week we talked about, beautiful basics from Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, and then the dual lands or whatever. But in Arabian Nights, we got things like, I'll just get them out of the way, Bazaar of Baghdad and Library of Alexandria. 2 of the most expensive lands in the game. They both see play in Vintage. They're both never going to get reprinted again. I'm not really going to go into them because 99.99% of players will never come into contact with them. But I do want to talk about a few little ditties, the first of which is called, get this, City of Brass. First printed ever in Arabian Nights. Taps for 1 mana of any color and deals 1 damage to you. Great in 5 color decks, great in 4 color decks. Could go all the way down to as little as 2 color decks if you need the fixing. This card has been reprinted in, I think it was Chronicles reprinted. It was like in 6th, 7th, 9th, maybe in some Commander products. I'm not exactly sure. It's been reprinted a bunch and it's stood the test of time because 1 mana of any color is worth 1 life, it turns out, especially in Commander when you start at 40. So that's definitely an excellent one. Oh, next big money one I wanted to talk about on the list, Diamond Valley. This is, you can tap it, sack a creature, gain life equal to that creature's toughness. That was actually reprinted on one of the flip Ixalan lands. Arguel's Bloodfast. If you have less than 5 life, you flip it, and then it's Diamond Valley on the other side. So hasn't really stood the test of time, but the ability is still good. And instead of paying like $600 for your Diamond Valley or whatever it is, you can get your Arguel's Bloodfast. Not quite the same, but it's there. Last 2 lands I'll hit on, both of which I have experience with firsthand. The first one, Desert. OG Desert was originally printed in Arabian Nights. You can tap it for a colorless or tap it to deal 1 damage to target attacking creature. Brando actually plays this in his Hirobi Death's Whale deck because the commander, Hirobi, says whenever a creature is targeted by a spell or an ability, destroy that creature. And if a creature is attacking and you have a desert out, you can just target it to deal 1 damage, and then Hirobi will kill it, even if the desert doesn't. So, super cool card, and it made wave for a bunch of deserts, right? All the deserts in Amonkhet block, for example. You got cycling deserts, you got deserts that have sacrifice effects, all these things. Final one, and this is a personal deck of mine. Shout out to Dana Roach as well from CMDR Central and EDH Recast. This one is Elephant Graveyard. We were talking about this at Magic Fest Vegas last year. Elephant Graveyard is a land that taps for colorless, or you can tap it to regenerate target elephant. And one of my favorite decks is Mistform Ultimus. He's every creature type. So if he's going to die, I can use Elephant Graveyard to regenerate him because he's an elephant. So excellent. So the point is, lands that don't tap for mana. They were originally introduced in Arabian Nights. Moving on. Arabian Nights was the first set that introduced cards that could steal things. Aladdin steals an artifact, and I think Old Man of the Sea taps to steal a creature? Something like that. Arabian Nights was the first set to introduce -1/-1 counters as well. It was the first set to feature coin flipping, which has stood the test of time. I mean, so have -1/-1 counters and proliferate and all that jazz, right? But coin flipping has as well, all the way up to, I think like in Ravnica Allegiance or the newest Ravnica block, there's a few different cards that use coin flipping, and that was way back in 1993 when that was first a thing. So super cool there. We've got classics in here like Desert Twister. Remember when destroy target permanent cost green 4? Yeah, now it costs like black-white or black-green. Great. Arabian Nights. I think Arabian Nights was the first set that had like a cantrip effect as well. Like when you cast it or when you activate the ability, you also draw a card on top of what the ability did. In Jeweled Bird, get this. Remove Jeweled Bird from your deck before playing, if not playing for ante. So ante was when you used to shuffle up and then you'd flip the top card of your deck over, and that card was the card that you were playing for. If you lost that card, and you didn't own it anymore. They've since, of course, nixed that rule because then it's like gambling, right? When you're playing to win somebody else's cards. So you can't do that anymore. So if you're not playing for ante, you remove Jeweled Bird from the game. It's like banned in every format. But it was a 1-drop artifact that you tap to draw a card and put your contribution to the ante into your graveyard and replace it with Jeweled Bird. So how many Jeweled Birds traded hands over the years? That's what I want to know. Between 93 and 5. How many Jeweled Birds switched hands? That's what I want to know. Last couple things I want to touch on. One, actually good. One, really bad. The good one. Oubliette. Originally printed at Common in Arabian Nights. And anybody who plays Pauper or anybody who wants or owns an Oubliette, of course they know that. But Oubliette was black 1 for an enchantment, and essentially it's Oblivion Ring for just a creature. So enchantment enters the battlefield, exiles a creature until Oubliette leaves the battlefield. Essentially, that's kind of like what O-Ring does, right? Or any O-Ring equivalent. It was originally in there at Common, and because it was Common, it ceased play in Pauper and Pauper EDH, and as a result, it's like really expensive. I think it might be the most expensive common in the set, if you're not counting the one of Mountain. And there's a lot of talk of Oubliette being reprinted in the new Modern Horizons. We talked about it on Commander Cookout a little bit, but I thought it was worth another mention as well. I actually have an Oubliette. I'm not playing it in a deck. Maybe I should, if it gets reprinted, I want to jam my original one in something just to flex on people. I don't know. Last thing, check this out. There's a card in Arabian Nights, and in a couple other sets, there are cards that do a very similar thing that they don't print anymore. And get this. They're called expansion hosers or expansion haters. If you've never seen these cards, they're either totally, completely, utterly unplayable and terrible, or really awesome in the exact scenario. So City in a Bottle is an expansion hoser. It's 2-drop artifact. Whenever this is the Oracle text. Whenever a non-token permanent originally printed in Arabian Nights expansion, other than City in a Bottle, is on the battlefield, its controller sacrifices it. Players can't play cards originally printed in the Arabian Nights expansion. Like, what? This was why there wasn't basic lands in the set. This is the card. And if you really wanted to drive it home, if you're playing City in a Bottle in a meta full of red decks, like, you can't play Mountain because it was printed in Arabian Nights. It wasn't originally printed in Arabian Nights, so like it's still fair game. But if you're playing against everybody who runs City of Brass And if you're playing against a deck that jams like Elephant Tribal and you know they have an elephant graveyard, or there is that person in your play group who is running Bazaar of Baghdad in their Dredge EDH deck, you can just jam your City in a Bottle and they can't play their best Dredge card. I don't know. I thought it was worth mentioning because we see them a couple times in the first few years of Magic where they just shut off all the cards from a certain set. And that's always fun to me just because it's a little piece of Magic's history, right? Like the anti-cards. Jeweled Bird. Terrible. I should probably get one and just alter it and give it away as a Christmas present or something. You literally give that card away. That's what that card was printed for. Anyways, that's the set retrospective. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you think that that's still a fine name. I don't know. Get after me on Twitter at CADPopcast. If you have any Arabian Nights memories, maybe you played back then, maybe you have Arabian Nights cards, like probably the pimpest version of City of Brass, for example, is the Arabian Nights one. I think there's like a foil test printing City of Brass that's worth like $7 trillion. But if you're not jamming that, maybe the City of Brass one's the coolest. Let me know if you jam stuff from Arabian Nights other than the cards I talked about, because I would love to hear. This was actually even before my time. So lots of these cards I've never even seen in person, right? Other than being at events. If you want to submit anything longer form than Twitter, cadpopcast@gmail.com, or shoot me a message on Patreon. You can just search Commander Ad Populum there, and I should come up now that everything is figured out with the web address and stuff. And again, if you have any skills with Illustrator, Photoshop, if you're an artist, you want to make me a logo, feel free to shoot those my way as well. I'd be happy to feature them or at least give you a shout out on air. All right, last thing of the day. Big thank you to all of the patrons, all of the listeners, again, all of the Twitter followers. It's been great so far. It's a little bit nerve-wracking still to put myself out there even after a couple weeks. And it's still kind of awkward sitting here in the studio by myself. So knowing that people are actually listening, paying attention, makes me feel really good. It's very motivating. Listen in next week. I'll be back in your ears on Wednesday afternoon. I'm switching it up a little bit. I've got all of my decks sitting in front of me right now, and I'm going to be giving you another little look inside my EDH brain to give you a little bit more well-rounded picture of where I'm coming from as far as Commander is concerned. So if that's of any interest to you, come back and see me, and I still don't have a sign-off. So I'll see you next Wednesday.